Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out, everybody.
Look, we're both wearing sweater vests.
There we go. Twinsies. Speak to the audience at home, Joe. And everyone at home. Hello. And
Stand in front of me for the camera.
Right.
Is that okay?
Got it. Okay. So Aaron asked the board if we really needed to have this meeting, and David and I were like, yeah, we need to have this meeting. We need to have an open forum, and maybe we didn't need to have this meeting, but we think probably the main reason is because your fees have been frozen for, this is the second year, or we're talking about the second year of a 3-year freeze on everybody's SWAN fees. So that could be one reason why we're not getting a huge crowd. Could be the snow. Anyway, so I'm just going to do a quick overview and then hand this over to Aaron. But obviously, when we're talking about the SWAN budget, we're talking about something that impacts all of you and through your fees as a membership. So we figured, hey, we want everyone to be able to have some input. We've put out our draft. You've seen what that looks like. It's preliminary, but we'd like to hear from everybody, see if there's something we overlooked, have everybody's eyes take a look at it, see if there's something that they'd either propose to add, subtract, revise. So that today gives you that chance. And obviously, we'll be meeting as a board next Friday and going into this a little bit more and making our final recommendations. But then at the March 3rd quarterly, we'll have the membership vote. That's correct, right? Yeah. Okay. So a couple things I just wanted to go over as I look through this. We are doing the planning for FY17, and that is the second year of this fixed fees setup. We had the 3-year setup, and we're doing it, that's year 2 of the 3 years, and for those 3 years, FY16, 17, and 18, the proposed fees are frozen at 13% lower than they were with your FY15. Also in this includes 2 new libraries, Lansing and Franklin Park, will be added into the mix into our membership. So that's a good thing too. Also then, we are talking about year 2 of a 3-year agreement with SWAN and Rails, where Rails is essentially cutting us a check for the consortium. So that's a good thing too. So those 2 things are in line, and we know that that's going to be approximately $350,000. Could be more. Rails hasn't done their budget yet, but it won't be less. Staffing changes. So over the last 9 years, 10 years, you've seen kind of the ebb and flow, and I think it's in, not I think, it's in your paperwork there. And we're rebuilding SWAN with purpose. So, you know, that's very thought through and designed as we add staffing back to SWAN. One other big thing is that the reserves are very, very healthy, and that allows, that's one of the reasons we can do this, where we've had a 13% reduction on your SWAN fees. So we may need those reserves, so that's why we don't want to get too crazy as we figure out if we're going to have to design or build out our own facility. And also what's going on with the state funding, we don't know. So it's good that we do have some healthy reserves. But one thing that I think that Aaron put together that's in there, and maybe it wasn't Aaron, it was somebody before you, but this kind of 5-year chart is great. I think when I see that kind of reserve worksheet, then I know, okay, why. So we've got built into our policy 4 months of reserves, but even after that, even after our build-out, we still have extra money. So our reserves are very healthy. That allowed us to do this 3-year reduction and keep those fees set. But we also have, you know, the possibility down with the Futures Task Force about consortium mergers. We've got a facility committee talking about the building and what SWAN's needs are. And then lastly, then as we talk about these 3 years, we've got the membership fee committee to make a recommendation. So in the fall of 17, that membership, or the SWAN membership fee committee will be talking about, okay, what is FY19 going to look like? So I know that's a little bit ways off, but we kind of just locked in those SWAN fees without any thoughts to how many circs and people and books and all the things that you have that tallied into that. We just kind of locked that in, but we will be looking at that again, and then a proposal will come in the fall of 17 as we prepare for the FY19 budget for SWAN. So those were the kind of things that I just kind of picked out, and I will turn it over to Aaron for getting into the nitty-gritty.
Wow, that was a terrific overview. I mean,
All right,
really.
Drop the mic.
The packet that was shared online, and thank you, Jim. I'll just hit the on-off button. There we go. We are broadcasting live. Hi, I'm Aaron Skog. I'm the Executive Director of SWAN, in case you don't know. Thank you all for turning out here in person. Susan Ricker, our Library Relations Specialist, is monitoring the online chat. Any questions so far?
Not yet, but people are starting to check in.
They are checking in, so maybe they are considering, instead of driving into this meeting, they'll attend remotely. But we'll see what questions that maybe they have, and we'll check in with Susan, or Susan, put your hand up or something. So as Jim outlined for you all, there is a packet. I hope maybe that you have it with you or looking online. The way the packet is arranged is at least the exhibits A1 through 9 is the narrative of the budget, and then A10 is showing a reserve worksheet. A11 is also then showing how that feeds into projecting the reserves as they go out. We'll be able to talk a little bit about that. A12 and A13 is showing library proposed fees for FY17 with a comparison of how they were in 15, just to illustrate that they were lowered across the board 13%. And then the budget itself is on exhibits A14 and A15. Based on some initial discussion with the SWAN board and some of what I had been wanting to do for this budget overview, is I thought it would be helpful also to provide some background as far as staffing, so that there's a chart here on A2 that is explaining a little bit of some of those changes. We have new directors and new board members that may not be as familiar, going way back when SWAN was having to get through some other times where there were some more uncertainty in terms of its future with the system. And there were a lot of changes made in our operations, and a number of positions were eliminated or consolidated or contracted out. So at various points in that chart, we're looking at maybe we were down to 17, 16 staff. Some of this was done through contracted work with Versatile. Some of it was contracted with Innovative Interfaces staff. We also, under member services, started contracting out for some of the weekend and evening phone support through an answering service. So I just want to hit upon that where we can, we will contract out or go with consultants where we feel we can where it's necessary. That said, we are also looking at the fact that during that time, there were a lot of stipulations put out there that with this sort of staffing plan, it was not designed to do a migration nor roll out up-teen so many products that we have signed with Cersei Dynex to bring forward. Kate Boyle and I were just chatting this morning about how many there are, and how we're excited to get them out, and there's member libraries excited to get them out. So what we're really looking at is appropriate staffing to be able to deliver on that. So I included that as an overview in the A2, A3. The revenue pie chart on A3 is something that I had put together really just to illustrate what the revenue looks like as far as membership fees compared mostly against the revenue from Rails. That 3-year agreement between SWAN and Rails locks in at that rate. It's very favorable to SWAN, in fact, in that those support numbers don't go down, although they will look at those on an annual basis and adjust them, but they will never adjust downward. They could go up. Prior to today's meeting, I checked with Ann Slaughter, the Director of Technology with Rails, who's responsible for that, and she did not have numbers for me to give to you today, but it's possible maybe by the March meeting I may have an updated number for the Rails revenue. On A4 I go over some of the fees, breakdown as far as what fees and services mean, and I do this by budget numbers. Our chart of accounts that we follow is something that is prescribed for all the LSAPs. So the way we budget, if it seems a little foreign to you, it's mostly because we're following something that was laid out by State Library for Systems, and RSA, Magic, SWAN, and Prairie Cat all follow basically the same guidelines, so we could have more of a apples to apples comparison of, as far as our budgets. So what I've tried to do more of is in this narrative explain a little bit more where the revenue and expenses are and what goes into those. So let me stop for a moment, and I can take questions about any of the revenue section of this budget if you have them. It's fairly straightforward, but I'm happy to answer. Nothing? And it does include Franklin Park and Lansing, which I had to go back and say, well, if they were in the FY17 formula, what would their fee look like? So it was sort of retrofitting it and putting them in so that I could charge them a membership fee and let them know how to budget and know what our revenue is going to look like from that. Expenses. Knowing that we were coming through at least two years this last year with some serious changes as far as our operations with Cersei Dynex, with a lot of the other pieces that accompanied the migration with our changes, I really went over all of our expenses with the board in a great level of detail per budget line. So these aren't just lines that just came over just saying, oh, we spent this much last year. It's more like we're not spending money on this service anymore. We are looking towards this. So I wanted to make sure that the expenses reflected reality, not just some theoretical number that was just on the sheet without really diving in. So this meant in terms of going into looking at the salaries, really looking at the payroll that we just most recently had run, just to make sure that some of the benefits that we have been budgeting for were more accurate. An example of where I'll just flat out to say I was not budgeting accurately is in the 50/70 health, dental, life, and disability insurance. That was an area where it was really under budgeted in the prior year, and I wanted to make sure that we had a more accurate budget for this fiscal year. Some of this benefited from the fact that we aren't looking to approve the SWAN budget and membership fees at the December meeting, that I could go out to March, and that means when the open enrollment for Limerick ends at the end of December, by January I'll have a more accurate picture of what that is supposed to be as far as the benefits that staff have elected. Of course, we've recently added a position in our IT department, so it was also making sure that when that person was onboarded that we had accurate information as far as for the FY17 budget. Some of the other lines in here that I'm looking at on A6 really, as far as that jump out at me somewhat, like the liability insurance. I was making sure the board was aware of that. We added in cybercrime, considering that SWAN has such an online presence, and since we pool all of your patron data together in a shared database, we really wanted to make sure that from that standpoint that we were covered. I would imagine a number of libraries have either always had cybercrime or have recently maybe added that in. I know that question's come up. I think, Kathy, you emailed me about that like a couple months ago, and I said I was in the process of adding that in, so just to show you that's in there, but that, of course, that line goes up because of that. Yeah, so what Kathy's saying as far as the other insurance pool, Lyra, they were adding that, or required to add that in, those libraries that were part of that? Okay. Some of the other things that I wanted to note, as we said, as part of the migration, we're looking to purchase ProPay swipes for our SWAN libraries as part of that rollout. So we have not done that purchase, so this budget is reflecting that into 5310 line. What we're also looking at doing within this budget is really looking at operations from the standpoint, again, of if we could contract out for certain aspects of it, we will. One of the things that Member Services and Kate Boyle and I have talked about is getting away from doing the print all centralized. A couple benefits of that. One, I can contract out that service with unique management, and I've shared with the board some of the way the notices look. They look fantastic, but it also means that I'm getting away from having to replace at least $20,000 worth of equipment, which is printers and a machine that folds and seals those, and we'd be moving towards a different style of notice. Having that flexibility also gives us flexibility for our facilities committee when we're looking at what is our base of operations. Do we need to be tied down to a place where notices are printed, centrally sorted, and then run through a mail machine versus it's a file that goes out to Unique and they basically do all the printing and send it out. So it means that as we consider our options either for staying in Burr Ridge or elsewhere, that our operations will be a little bit more reflective of what I would think that the SWAN needs to be moving forward. It's something that I've talked about maybe in the past, maybe not so much with the membership, but it seemed like we were ready considering the number of printed notices have been steadily streaming down as we add in text, email, our pilot with SVA for Woodridge dramatically lowered the number of printed notices that they have. So really what we're looking at is even within this contracting out for notice printing on a per notice basis, that number is just going to continue to go down. So rather than invest in all this equipment, I thought it would be better to kind of look at this a little bit differently. The 5400 line shows a lot of the Cersei Dynex costs, comparing it against what Innovative Interfaces had. Also factoring in that Lansing and Franklin Park coming in are going to add some additional licensing. But this line also includes a proxy service subscription that was quoted by EBSCO at $32,500. This is for all 77 libraries. I've been keeping the SWAN board at least abreast of what it would mean to have the EDS integration for article and online database searching in enterprise, how we were going to need this component in order to make it easy for patrons at home. If they see a resource, they find it, and they click on it, and then they get prompted to log in. That is not native within the enterprise system, nor with EBSCO alone. We needed a third-party service to make that work. This cost is probably the high end of what that would be in order to make that work. Rails IT and SWAN IT have also been exploring a way of creating a proxy system using open source tools. They're not done. Rather than move forward with a budget that says, well, it's going to be zero for this proxy service, I felt like I at least want to put something in place that we know that EBSCO guarantees will work. But I want to let you know that we are exploring other options. And one of these would be, we're writing something that would be put available out there for the community to use. The library community would probably be thrilled to find that there's a proxy system that's been made for libraries that's available for them to download and use. So I don't really have anything to show you with that other than to let you know that in 5400, that's where we have to budget that expense. Let me stop right there and ask, I think that's a significant expense, but I thought maybe you would want to know why that's there. And that was something that the board did not see in the last draft. And going back and reviewing everything for this meeting, I said, you know what? I don't have that in there, and I'm going to need to have that in there. Questions online? Thumbs up. The consulting line, this would be where Versal normally would have been budgeted for, if we had retained their services at a full amount, would have had the $193,000 basically as far as that budget. Last year I had only had about half of that. So what we're looking at this point is that budget line having come down about 82%. I am including some consulting for strategic planning, which SWAN is going to be kicking off this year at some point. The board hasn't spent a lot of time on this yet because we want to maybe incorporate it into maybe our summer event. And also we have discussions with Link and Magic. There's only been 2 meetings with those groups right now, but they've been very positive, and I wanted to at least budget for the possibility that we may need consultants to help with getting all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. Any questions about the consulting piece? Yes?
So the Versatile, what Versatile was doing for SWAN, what are we doing with that now? I mean, what are they doing? Have we hired staff to do what Versatile was doing?
We have hired 1 full-time employee. That's reflected in the personnel line. I think I maybe had noted that under the personnel section explaining why the staffing was going up. That was one position to basically fill the need of what we're looking at as far as our network support. I think at the quarterly meeting we'll be talking a little bit more about some of the direction that we're looking at as far as our network now that Rudy Host has been hired, who is a Rails network administrator and now is part of the SWAN group. He started February 1st. Information service costs is a line that includes all the OCLC costs, SWAN membership, SWAN libraries, all of your OCLC membership is included within your SWAN membership. So question from Susan.
We just had a comment online. Can you just repeat the viewer's question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Versatile.
The question was, in lieu of the Versatile contract having ended, what were we doing for that service? And the answer to that was, we've added a full-time position, and this budget reflects that position, and this was a position that was worked on in FY16 with the board, and they started February 1st. OCLC, as you know, their fees are set at a group services contract by the state. I have had to include the fees that Franklin Park and Lansing were paying in this, so some of that OCLC costs have gone up just because of that. And we're also looking at ongoing work with what is a change of address to the patron database. This is something that we did during the migration. Some of you may remember or not, what we ended up doing is the whole patron database was extracted, formatted, cleaned up, made all caps, everything put in the right fields. Anybody that had a change of address, so they moved from one location to the other, was reflected in there, and then the database was imported again. We liked how that went, and we spoke with other consortia, and a lot of them do this annually, and we thought we should be also making sure our patron database retains that nice, clean format that we spent all that time in during the migration, so that's included in there as well. I've already spoken about the unique management service for notice printing. That's detailed there in the 5480. Any questions about that? No? None, Susan? Group purchase. This may actually involve some questions for some of the libraries that are maybe listed here that we're looking at replacing some sonic wall units. I at least just wanted to list those libraries here. There were 11. I don't know if I could answer them right at this meeting, but I would say we can certainly follow up with our IT group, with Stephen Schluitt, who's not here today. But if you do have questions about, well, my library is listed here, what does this mean? Really what I'm looking at is making sure that this budget is also reflecting the fact that we have a number of sonic wall that are going end of life. They should be replaced. That will include some consulting one-on-one with these libraries' IT staff to make sure that we're not over-speccing or anything like that, that you get the appropriate unit in there. And then this would probably kick off some other discussions as far as access to the firewall that libraries have been wanting more access to. And that's going to be part of, I think, what we'll be covering more in March. Questions about that? I've already told you I don't know if I could answer all the details about these firewalls. I just want to make sure that we budgeted for it. Ready to talk about reserves? So the reserves worksheet is something, if we flip over to A10, this was created with a SWAN treasurer, and Jim and I have looked this over and discussed it. We really wanted to make sure, one, that it reflected the fact that we've now essentially paid for our ILS migration. So what we're looking at for the 16-17 fiscal years is also doing some ILS server replacement. But we've continued to budget for the possibility if we needed to get a new facility and purchase all the equipment associated with that. So there is a facilities committee that's had one meeting. They have another meeting that's planned this month, and we're starting to dig into what it may look like as far as what type of facility or size. But we made sure to budget for that, and these numbers really have not been updated since the probably the business plan committee or the facilities committee first met. So we'll probably be updating these after maybe the facilities committee has done a little bit more work. I saw a hand going up. Two hands.
Are these numbers for the reserves, is that assuming a continued Rails contribution or not assuming a Rails contribution? Not that there won't be one, I'm just asking, in the event that Rails doesn't have money down the road. Are you assuming that's with Rails contribution?
It's not including anything like that. It's not including any planned budget, like budget deficits. It's just sort of outlining what those costs would be. So if you look over to the projected 6 years sheet, one of the questions I was asked, like, well, you have some budget lines here that are for facility, but you're not planning on spending that. What does that mean as far as the server replacement that's in 17 and 18 and FY18? Is that happen? And the answer is yes, that is going to happen. In FY19, the 465,740, you guys will have to, be the determiner of if we're going to do another ILS migration or not. But that's the number that we spent on the last migration that's in there. SWAN obviously has some very healthy reserves here, so you can support some deficit budgeting if you need to. There's a four-month operating policy that was set by the board. If in the event that the news for Rails is not good, we could go back to that policy and make it 6 or 12 months, as I know Rails has done as well, I think in the recent past. Yeah, it's an 18 months. So if the SWAN membership felt like that was needed, certainly that could be brought up and the board could do that. Question from Susan.
Could you just repeat Kathy's question?
Yeah, Kathy's question was, is this budget reflecting, or the reserves reflecting, any possibility that Rails would not be funding SWAN? And it is not. But we are making sure that we are budgeting for known expenses or possible expenses, but it does not include that. Sorry, online viewers. Any questions about the reserves, where that's at? Okay. Good job, Jim, working on that with me. And then here you go, as far as A12, A13, this is typically what really brings everybody out, but it may be because a lot of people understood that the fees were being fixed, and this was year 2 of them being fixed. They kind of had a pretty good idea of what to budget for. We plan on doing this one more fiscal year. And then if I can flip back to that reserves worksheet on 11 again, the 19, 20, and fiscal year 21, where I say reserves collected at 50, 50, 50, that doesn't have to happen. That is just showing, if we reinstated that and set it at that number, that the reserves, of course, would start to go up again. It could be that we are not going to include that with any of the budgeting at that point. If the reserves are looking good, if the situation in 3 years' time between SWAN and Rails hasn't really changed much. So, questions about the membership fees? And exhibits 14 and 15 show your revenue and expenses. All those budget lines have been detailed out in the narrative. This is a deficit budget, if you look on 15 at the end. Normally it would be 0 because I would go back and charge your membership fees, whatever it was, to account for that. Since your fees are fixed, your reserves are healthy, we're good for this year. Jeannie, you're nodding. Is that good? Okay by your book? Okay. Any other questions in the audience or online? None online. How many people are online? Can you tell? 15. 15, all right. Hi, 15. Jim, is there more we want to cover?
No, I feel terrible.
Don't feel terrible. This is a very open process. New directors coming here are getting a sense of how the budgeting works. Wow, 10:05. What's that? Yeah, I don't know. Brunch?
But yeah, maybe just throw it out to folks that if they do come across,
Okay.
get back in touch with you or the board.
So let's say you go back and you think about this some more and you say, well, I have concerns about this area of the budget or this line or this expense. You can always send that question to me. I touched the microphone, sorry. Or the board. You can email board representatives. If you look on our SWAN support site on the governance link, all the board members' email addresses are listed, or you can give them a call. Board is meeting on the 19th of February, so not this Friday, next week. And they'll be looking over a budget that will be brought forward at the March quarterly meeting for a roll call approval. So those of you that are new, we go through library by library and say yay or nay as far as the budget. So we need a quorum for that meeting, right? Well, in order to hold the meeting, at least as far as from that standpoint, there would be a quorum of the board. The bylaws do not say as far as the budget that there has to be a quorum of the membership, but the budget would need to pass of the membership, but we don't always get everyone out. That's usually a well-attended meeting because it is budget approval. And without any other committee of the whole meetings, I would think March would be very exciting for you all to come out. Okay, question from Rich. All right, I'm not repeating the questions, I'm being bad.
So the deficit then will just come from the reserves or what?
Essentially, deficit would be made up from the reserves. Yes, is the question was, how would we handle that? Okay. Jim, do you want to adjourn the meeting? Here, I'll turn on the mic for you.
All right, that's it. It's pretty quiet here. Nobody online. All right, well, thank you all for coming out. We're adjourned.